In the course of your research, did you uncover anything that was interesting to you? Like, did you see, being a police trained mind, did you see maybe there were some inconsistencies in the official story, or was there anything that stood out to you about, maybe something that was being done that shouldn't have been done? As you're going back over this, it's not just like you're a normal reporter.
I think the thing that stood out the most was almost all of these murders went unsolved.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Officially unsolved.
Now, why do you
You're
think that is?
speaking about in both books?
More so in the rise and fall of the Cleveland Mafia. In the early days, there were a lot of unsolved murders. My grandfather's murder is officially unsolved, but they had, the police back then had their suspicions, and I have my suspicions.
Why do you think they went unsolved?
I think because back then there was a language issue with the people in the neighborhoods where the Italian immigrants were from. They were afraid to talk, and these killers back then they were very efficient. They'd just wait around the corner from someone, 2 or 3 of them, and boom, it's over just like that. They're gone.
Could bigotry have been a part of it? Is there something where it was like, well, let the immigrants kill each other?
I don't think so. I think anytime there's murder, because this would happen later as organized crime sort of became more organized, and the younger guys started treating, like you mentioned, Meyer Lansky. They started treating it more like a business because they knew that the murders attracted too much heat.
Bad for business.
Too much heat, bad for business, too much heat from law enforcement.
Was there an understanding when you were on the force of there were some guys that maybe they knew, alluding to what they saw, what we saw anyway in The Irishman, they knew who was doing what business, but as long as they kept it to themselves, they were not to be bothered?
No, and my involvement as a cop had nothing to do. I wasn't involved in organized crime. We had almost no organized crime cases at that time. This happened, as you asked before, like how old was I? Danny Green was killed in '77 ironically, coincidentally, in Lyndhurst, which was the town that I worked in. Out of all those suburbs, you've been to Cleveland, all those suburbs in Cuyahoga County. But I really had nothing to do professionally as a law enforcer with the organized crime. This project was all separate. All this research, all the interest in the
we're not trying to like get you. We don't think like it's. But we're.
No, that's actually the truth, though.
It's interesting that again in the movie, and you did say that there were some disparities between the book and the movie. There appeared to be, or at least the Val Kilmer character was like he knew what Shondor Burns was doing. He knew what John Nardi was doing. He knew what Danny Green was. Everybody knew, but as long as they kept it to themselves, there was like this kind of unwritten rule.
I feel like that's common in a lot of police versus crime practices. They know that these guys are doing it, but they have to prove it to.
Well, that's the thing, because I got to disagree. I think they would have put these guys in prison
if they could
any
right?
time that they could, but there were times that they were able to convict them. And then Danny Green, in his case, he became an FBI informant, and he was considered a high-ranking.
And he did that almost immediately when he first got busted. When he became the head of the union,
of the Longshoremen's Union,
right?
Yeah, yes, exactly.
So that's when he started his relationship with the FBI.
Yes, you've been doing your research, both you guys. I'm impressed.
Well, trying to show up. We got a best-selling author here. We got an intellect. We got a chief of police and an intellectual powerhouse here.
And this stuff. I find this stuff very compelling. It's really interesting stuff. Too.
Oh, it makes for great stories. I mean, it's true crime is a big one, but this is a subgenre, you might say, of true crime, and it's a very popular one.
I think the craziest part of the whole story to me is who killed Danny Green. Was it Ray Ferito?
Yes.
Ray Ferito was one of the hit.
They brought him in from L.A.
Now, I've read different things. I read he killed 16 people. I read he killed 30 people. I read one thing that said he's suspected of as many as 60 murders.
Yeah, I don't believe any of that. I believe he was responsible for one, maybe 2 murders prior to Danny Green.
Really? Yeah. And now he's taking credit after the fact?
Well, these things get blown out of proportion. And somebody exaggerates a number, somebody writes about it without doing the research. But I never read anything that Ray Ferito was responsible for that many.
And he turned state property almost immediately after that, correct?
Pretty much, yeah, because they made mistakes when Danny was murdered. When they used a remote control switch to blow up the bomb as Danny was coming back from his dental appointment.
Which we were saying, one of the worst ways to spend your last few hours.
I know.
You know, go to get him. Like, I'm going to the dentist. Like you could, you know what I mean? Of all the things to do in your last few hours,
get him on the way in. You know?
Exactly,
come on, be a good guy. Get him on the way before. Yeah, he's sitting there with a toothache, going, man, I hate this toothache. I'd do anything to not have this. Man, the bombs too, man. What a way to go.
I'm sorry though. You were saying with the switch from the. You were saying with the switch, there was they fouled up control. With the murder.
Well, Ray Ferito and Ronnie Carabia from the Youngstown area, important Cleveland organized crime figure in Youngstown. He's sort of was the overseer of the Cleveland mob's interests in Youngstown. They were in the getaway car, and one of them was driving, and the other one was in the back seat with the remote control switch. And that, I mean, when do you ever see something like that? There's a couple circumstances where you might, somebody under arrest in a police car, somebody in a cab or an Uber or whatever.
Yeah, back then it would have seemed very odd.
Yeah,
today it's all right. This guy's in an Uber.
And there was right. And there was a witness, a young couple that saw this, and the girl was she was an artist, and she made a sketch when she got home of the driver. I think the driver was Ray. She made a sketch of Ray Ferito, gave it to her father, who happened to be a cop.
Jeez.
He turned it over to the Cleveland Police Intelligence Unit, and they recognized from the sketch that was Ray Ferito from Erie, PA.
That's like watching the first 48. I don't know how true it is or not, but it's like it seems like 90% of police work is just dumb luck. Like it's like the first 48. Have you seen the first 48? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I have on occasion. Yeah, that's an important number, to get moving with your investigation.
Yeah, it's something like
within the first 48 hours, you're most likely to solve a crime.
It's like an insane number. It's like 90% or something like that. If it's specific to violent crimes, But like the way that these guys get caught all the time, you're just like,
see the mistakes, dumb shit.
Yeah. Well, but also it's just like, you blew the guy up, and there was a witness. Oh, that sucks. And she's a sketch artist. Oh, what? And their dad's a cop. What the? Come on, this is insanity. Come on, like you watch the first 48 and stuff like that all the time. It's like, I saw who did it. How'd you see him? Well, that dude owed me $25, and I was coming over to collect, and then I saw he killed the guy. So now I'm like, if he ain't gonna pay me, I'm just gonna tell you where he did it. It's like. What?
Yeah.
You could have been coming to collect at any other time and you saw him do it? That sucks. I mean, the guy probably deserves to get caught. I'm not like pro criminal here on most accounts, but it's
and there was a lot of investigation. It's a very wide-ranging investigation. One of the things that helped is the different levels of law enforcement, like the Linders Police Department, Cleveland Police Department, the FBI, the alcohol, tobacco, and
ATF,
firearms, ATF, federal. They all worked together, created a strike force. I think they had at the state with the state charges. They had 2 county prosecutors assigned to the strike force, to the task force, and they worked jointly. And that was one of the first big cases, I think, in organized crime where all those different levels were not competing so much with each other.
Well, it's legit terrorism. You can't be having cars blowing up all over your city like that.
There were a lot of bombs going off.
That's not good.
A lot of collateral damage.
That's not good for anybody. That's not good for business. It's like, hey man, you want to open up a business in Cleveland? Sure do. Car blows up out in front. You know what?
Yeah, maybe not.
I think I'm good.
Might rethink that.
Yeah, I don't think Cleveland needs a dry cleaner.
So what led to Ferito after the bombing? Yep. They had fouled up a little bit. They got the sketch. Now did the Cleveland mob look to take him out?
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, he's the one witness who can put all the other ones in jail. So let's just eliminate him. And when he found that out, according to what he said, that's when he decided to.
The Cleveland mob seems a bit reckless compared to other mobs. They seem a bit wild.
They were, for the longest time, they didn't have a whole lot going on as far as having enforcers that went out to do this kind of thing. Things were kept kind of quiet. for a few decades. There just wasn't a whole lot of conflict. So when this happened, they didn't have many capable enforcers that just could go out and just, wait around the corner from Danny Green, boom, boom, and he's gone. And so he was a tough opponent because of that circumstance.
And who were the Irish guys that Danny Green was surrounding himself with?
He had crew.
There was Bill McWhorter.
He had those were fictitious.
Oh, they were fictitious.
Well, some of them were, and some of them weren't.
Okay.
And that's another issue, because you guys asked, like, what kind of problems do you have with the movie? I wish they would not have used the real names of characters if they were not going to portray them accurately. I think, generally speaking,
who's an example of that?
Keith Ritson.
Keith Ritson is a real guy or not?
He's a real guy. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he was portrayed by
Vinnie Jones.
Vinnie Jones.
Bullet Tooth Tony.
And there were a few other ones. I think Tommy Sanito. So I wish they would have just created fictitious names. I think what they did is they looked to me for some of this research, who was gone and who was still here. And if the guy was gone, they would use the name. If he was still here, they'd create a fictitious name.
Okay, interesting. Who made it out of those wars? Who is there anybody that made it out? Ferito, we know. Ferito made it out, and he was state property.
We talked about enforcers. There was a guy named Eugene Ciasulo. His nickname was the Animal. He was probably the most capable of the enforcers, and that's probably why he was targeted first. And he was almost killed with a bomb planted on his front porch. So he was taken out of commission. In fact, he came down to Florida to recuperate. Huh. So he made it out. Ferito. There were a few other ones, but a lot of them wound up in prison. Next go around with federal indictments. Now,
how accurate was the movie into saying that the Danny Green bombings helped expedite the National RICO case? Because I worked on a project, I directed a project called Mafia States of America with Michael Franzese and Sammy Gravano, they really pin it, the fall of the Mafia, on two people, on Benino for writing the book, and then for Joe Colombo.
Benino.
Am I saying Benino correctly?
I'm not sure. Are you saying, when you say writing the book, what do you mean?
Bonanno, not Benino. I got to get my brain checked. I did this the other day with Machida.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on here. I got to get like some alpha brain or something going on here.
Yeah, there were books. There was the Valachi, Joe Valachi.
Joe Valachi,
the first one. Yeah, that brought the Mafia name to the forefront. And made it a household term.
Yeah, what was the structure? We interviewed Rudy Giuliani, and he's looking at it going, oh, my God, all I got to do is fill in the blanks here. And you handed me a RICO case. Yeah. Like, you showed me exactly who's doing what. You actually literally connected the dots. Mm-hmm. So if I just fill in the blanks here, like, he couldn't, when he read it, he couldn't believe what he was reading. Yeah. He was like, I can't believe they actually wrote this. And that was Valachi, and it was Bonanno first, Valachi second. Valachi was the first guy, I think, that actually...
The Valachi papers.
He actually was the first guy to admit that it existed on tape, correct, Valachi?
I think he was deposed.
Yeah.
He did it in front of what do they call that, where it's there's a bunch of guys up there asking
grand
questions?
Jury? Was it a grand jury?
It might be. I'm not sure.
Dude, I spent
with those things
a year of my life.
Bobby Kennedy would do to people.
Yeah, congressional committee. Yeah,
right?
The subcommittee on
investigative committee. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he had a crazy thing where he thought, what's it? Shit. Now I'm doing it too. The guy in New York, who was his boss? Geneves, Vito Geneves. He thought Geneves, he saw him in prison, and for some reason he thought Geneves wanted him dead. Mm-hmm. Right? And then some guy came into his cell or something, and he thought this guy was there to kill him. Wasn't. Genevieve didn't even want him dead, really, at this point, and he beats this dude to death, Valachi. Kills the guy. And then immediately after that, it's like, they're coming for me, and he turned witness.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think the argument about the influence of Cleveland...
Well, it's not just paranoid. Forgive me one second. This is one of the things Gravano said that the feds would do all the time, is they would leak false information.
Oh, they plant a seed?
Yeah, and they would say, hey, look, we shouldn't be telling you this, but we have it on good authority that,
Right.
And now, once that's in your head, good luck getting that out.
Good authority that you're a target, in other words.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the influence of Cleveland in the demise is from the production of Angelo Leonardo coming out. Is at the time who was the acting boss of the Cleveland mob, flipping after a year or two in prison, federal racketeering charges, drugs and murder. He flips, and at the time he was the highest-ranking mob boss ever. This was before Gravano. You just didn't really hear a whole lot about him because he didn't, he did what he had to do, testified in.
What was his name?
Angelo Leonardo.
Never heard of him.
Yeah, he was the son of. We talked about the sugar war, the four Leonardo brothers. He was the son of the mafia boss. He avenged his father's murder in 1929. I think he was 18 at the time, and that was his entry into the Cleveland mob, and then he eventually rose through the ranks. Yeah. But he flipped after a year or two in prison, and he was the highest-ranking mobster to betray the Sicilian Code of Silence, Omerta.
Where, around what time was this? What time period was that?
85.
Oh, really?
84,
it's like right before Gravano.
Interesting.
Maybe.
Yeah, Rico really changed the game, man. Once they started throwing 100 years at people, it was over.
Yeah. Taking their property, seizing personal property. That was obtained with illegal money. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the things Franzese said. It was like, you look at a guy and you say, look, you're going to do 10 years, and he's like, yeah, I'll knock it down to 7, whatever. I'll come out, I have my money. But now you're looking at consecutive life sentences, and it's like, okay, I think I'd like to have a conversation.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
Well, Leonardo was a key witness in the straw man trials. Have you heard of those? It was the story that's portrayed in the movie Casino. Sharon Stone.
The straw man trial?
No, I'm not familiar.
Yeah, the casino
movie,
skimming trials. Casino.
Oh, the skin. Yeah. Love the movie.
Yeah.
I'm aware of the skim. That was big, and that was where Kansas City had a big involvement.
Kansas City,
with
Milwaukee, Cleveland, Chicago, and Las Vegas. They're pulling out. They're basically stealing from the casino. So when that came down, they dubbed it the straw man trial, straw man 1, straw man 2. And Angelo Leonardo was a key prosecution witness. And then he testified in the big commission trial that came maybe a couple years later, where the bosses of the New York mob families were put on trial.
Yeah, they just did a Netflix on that a few years ago. I think Franzese is in it as well.
Really?
Yeah. I forget what it's called, but yeah, it's on Netflix.
Fear City? Not Fear City.
Fear City.
Fear City.
That's it.
Documentary.
Yeah. Fear City is what it's called.
Fear City was very good.
Yes,
it was very good.
Real good. Yes.
Yeah.
You need to take a break?
No.
All right, cool.
And then you mentioned the Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations. Angelo testified before them and laid out the whole history of the mob, like from when his father came here, the bosses, the different families, and there's a whole file on testimony that they used to educate. He educated the senators and investigators on just the whole layout of the whole La Cosa Nostra from the earliest days.
How strong was the mob in Cleveland? In New York, there you couldn't get a garbage hauler without it being mob owned. There was the ports were mob owned. I mean, it's very famous that Roosevelt went to the mob during World War II and asked for help patrolling the
ports.
The ports, and when Rudy Giuliani helped get rid of the mob, he bragged that prices across the city went down 30% because there was they assumed 30% of all public services, the cost of all public services was being used as a kickback.
There was a time where I think they said $1 in $5 went to the mob
in New York. Yeah. And that, oddly enough, the infrastructure hasn't changed much. It just all goes to the government now.
To the government now. Yeah.
They got rid of the middleman, but the little guy is still paying the VIG, just not to the same people. Yeah. Was it the same way in Cleveland?
Well, you were asking about the position, like how powerful they were. And I think going back to the 20s and 30s, they say they were third in power after New York and Chicago. And part of that had to do, like I said, they're placed geographically between the two cities. Mm-hmm. And Cleveland even had a spot, Cleveland and Chicago had a spot on the commission, the newly created Mafia Commission in New York. So they were powerful, but as the years went by, I think their power dwindled, their influence dwindled a little bit. Still pretty powerful through the 60s.
What led to the waning of their power?
I think it's said that a big part of it is the fact that the longtime mafia boss was not inducting new membership. So the membership was aging, and pretty soon the guys were all 60 and 70, and then they had guys that were in their 30s.
Well, the demographics of the town changed, I would imagine. Cleveland turned out to be a very Eastern European town over time, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of Eastern European.
Yeah, I mean, you're not inducting guys named Miocic into La Cosa Nostra,
Well, you stopped having those if you were in the mob and you had a child and you had any sense, you had a son, you did not want him getting involved in that business. In some cases, these guys became attorneys. You're talking about attorneys. And in some of those cases, they would go on to defend their fathers or uncles maybe in these organized crime trials.
That's interesting. Huh. Yeah, especially you can see it from that position of like, yeah, my dad's wrong, but look at government does things wrong all the time, and sometimes these mob guys in the mob families really see government as bullies, really, that are, they do have that kind of romanticized Robin Hood aspect of, even like Sammy would say, I never hurt, I was a soldier in a war, I never hurt nobody that didn't have it coming. It's like, I wonder how everybody else living in the neighborhood felt. I didn't sign up to have this next door.
He was the greatest guy around.
He's the greatest guy around.
He was a good fella.
What about the murder? What murder?